Hello again everyone, and welcome to another video, and this one is going to be on using the CED, or the Course and Exam Description, to teach content and writing in AP World History Modern. Now, to get started, we need a topic to begin with, so we're going to look at topic 2.1, which you'll do fairly early in the year, and this is the Silk Roads. Now, page 58 in the CED has the learning objective and the historical developments that you'll teach when you're dealing with the Silk Roads. And if you look at the relationship between these, and I think this is perhaps one of the biggest takeaways from today, and one of the biggest takeaways from this entire APSI, is learning the relationship here between the learning objectives and the historical developments, and the incredible instructional value that you have here, the way the topic pages are laid out. So this has all been established to do a backwards design type of teaching in the classroom. So you have the learning objective right here. This is what we need to teach students. But to get to that learning objective, we have the historical developments right here. So the historical developments constitute the content necessary to satisfy that learning objective. That is of ultimate importance to understand about the layout of the CED. So to teach that learning objective, we'll go through the chunks of content here, the three historical developments that will allow students to understand or to explain the causes and the effects of the growth of networks of exchange after 1200. And of course, in the context of this topic, that is the Silk Roads. Now note how easily that learning objective can be turned into a prompt or a task in class. Analyze the causes and effects of the growth of networks of trade between 1200 and 1450. And here we have it. Notice that that prompt derives directly from the learning objective. And a claim to answer that is found actually right there in the historical development. That statement is a historical claim that satisfies that prompt. And within that center historical development, you also see some specific content that can be used to establish that claim or to support that claim. For example, you see the word caravanserai there. You also see money economies. Those are both specific pieces of evidence that support that topic sentence that are part of analyzing the causes and effects that we see right there. So paper money or paper currency is part of something called illustrative examples that you'll see sometimes in the margins of the CED. Now, what you need to know about this is that the illustrative examples are not all required content. You don't have to go through and teach all of the illustrative examples. They're just nudges to give you some idea of things that you can teach in that historical development. And what I like to teach here is flying money. The Song Dynasty came up with the first paper currency that was backed by a major state, and that was called flying money, and the kids seem to remember that very well. However, do note, if a specific term is given in the text of the historical development, that is absolutely required content. You don't have to teach flying money, but you do have to teach caravanserai. So let's look at that prompt again. Analyze the causes and effects of the growth of networks of trade between 1200 and 1450. Now, the historical claim we've already seen comes right from the historical development. A cause for the growth of trade networks between 1200 and 1450 was innovations in transportation and commercial technologies. To support that, we have two pieces of historical evidence drawn right from the CED, from that historical development. One of them is caravanserai. So you have to teach this. And the caravanserai, of course, are little inns, so to speak, that develop along the Silk Roads across Central Asia. They're places where merchants can pay some money to spend the night and be protected from bandits and have safety, let their animals drink water, and then continue on the next day or so. And they happen to be spaced about the distance that a merchant could go in a single day across those treacherous deserts of the Silk Road. Also, you're going to teach Chinese paper money or flying money, as I mentioned before. So these are things that we have to teach, but what's different about this is that you're not just teaching the definition of a caravanserai. And so your flashcard kids have half of it right. They need to know what a caravanserai is. However, students have to specifically be taught the relationship between caravanserai, Chinese paper money, and how they led to the growth of trade networks between 1200 and 1450. So they're learning these things in the context of a larger issue. That's very important when you teach the class. And the little Quizlet guides that you see where they just give you a definition and a term, that's okay, but it's not enough. The flashcard kids have to know how that term is relevant to the historical development and the learning objective. So let's look back at what we have again with the historical development. Look what we've done. We've taken the learning objective and we've made that into a prompt, so to speak. That's the goal. We need to teach that. And we've used the language of one of the historical developments as a direct claim to answer that. And we pulled some specific content out of here as well to support that historical claim. The content we've chosen is caravanserai and money economies. So what you have there in that box is the structure of a perfect paragraph in writing for AP World History. The historical claim at the beginning is a topic sentence. It makes a specific claim and it has a skill embedded in that claim. And then caravanserai and money are used as supporting evidence to argue back to that development and support that historical development. Now, let's look at what this would look like in actual writing. So here's a claim. The cause for the growth of trade networks between 1200 and 1450 was innovations in transportation and commercial technologies. Now we need to argue back what a caravanserai has to do with that. So students could write something like this. Caravanserai, inns along the Silk Roads, provided merchants places to rest and keep their valuables safe from bandits. And here is the clincher. With some of the risks of trade removed, merchants were willing to make more commercial journeys. Do you see how that connects directly back to the growth of trade? That sentence is extremely important in the analysis here. And you could go on with money. In the same way, paper money, which was invented by the Chinese, helped increase trade. It was lighter to carry than precious metals and easier to store and count. The added convenience of paper money contributed to more exchanges. Trade in luxury goods grew as a result. So notice that the content here, the specific pieces of evidence, were used specifically to support that claim. Now you remember in a previous video I said that I like to pool content within a single time period across different units of study. So if you wanted to go back to topic 1.1, when you're dealing with China, you have to teach about the incredible economic miracle, so to speak, of the Song dynasty. So I would also have students consider topic 1.1, and that will build out a separate paragraph here in this exercise, and here it is. Another cause of the growth of trade networks was that governments such as Song China actively promoted trade. With a growing demand of luxury goods outside of China, the Song government turned silk production into a state monopoly. The Song dynasty also discovered a large deposit of the white clay necessary for making porcelain. With large markets for these items, the Song government increased their production. Networks of trade greatly expanded after 1200. I might add that you could also talk about the Grand Canal, their rebuilding of the Grand Canal. That's actually one of the illustrative examples in topic 1.1. So here you have these two well-structured paragraphs. They all begin with topic sentences. Each topic sentence is a specific historical claim that is then supported by the evidence there. And really, when you have this, you have the very basic structure of a long essay question, or an LEQ, one of the assessment pieces on the AP exam. Because those two topic sentences right there, if they were pooled up and placed in the intro paragraph, would become the thesis statement. So written out in essay form, you'd have the intro paragraph with those two claims in the thesis, then each claim would be repeated as the topic sentence of a supporting paragraph that's then supported with historical evidence and analysis. The analysis is simply taking that evidence and showing how it supports the claim or the topic sentence. So all this is very important to keep in mind when you look at the objectives, when you look at the historical developments, and how you teach the specific pieces of content. You teach them in a specific context. Now let's look how this content that we've looked at might be assessed on the AP test. Here's a multiple choice question, and basically this is Marco Polo complaining about one of the places he visited, how immoral the people were there. When men came in, guests would allow them into their homes and give them their wives and their daughters to sleep with, and as a Italian Catholic, he was appalled at that, but he was very thankful here in this text that the Mongols had taken over and forbid this type of hospitality, so to speak. And at the very end of this quote, it says that it forbids individuals to furnish lodging to strangers who should be required instead to accommodate themselves at a caravanserai. Now, this question works because caravanserai is required content. It was named specifically in the historical development. And look at the question. Innovations in land-based trade, as alluded to in Polo's memoirs above, had what long-term effect on Eurasia? And if any student dealt with the CED the way I'm telling you to do it right now, they would very quickly identify B as the correct answer, an increase in the production and movement of luxury trade items. Let's go back and look at page 58 again on how we're supposed to teach this historical development. It says the growth of interregional trade in luxury goods was encouraged by innovations in previously existing transportation and commercial technologies, including the caravanserai. So there are so many things in world history that cannot be asked on the AP test. But caravanserai, if it's taught in the context of the growth of trade in luxury goods, is perfect game for the AP test. Let's look also at what this might look like as an LEQ essay on the test. Here's the prompt. This is what the LEQ looks like, the long essay question. The prompt is actually at the very bottom. It says, develop an argument that evaluates the causes of the expansion of exchange networks during this time. In the structure we looked at before with the topic sentences and the supporting paragraphs and those topic sentences becoming the thesis would be a perfect response to this, a basic response to that prompt. So the LEQ prompts, the long essay question prompts, are derived from the learning objectives. Now, just to show you that this is across the board in all the history courses, I want to do something unique here. I want to look at the CED in AP U.S. History. So here's a topic that U.S. History students learn, sectional conflict, regional differences, and the CED looks like this. We see the same thing. We can take that learning objective, make that the goal. Students need to explain how regional differences related to slavery caused tension in the years leading up to the Civil War. And again, the paragraphs in the historical development satisfies that. It gives the explanations, and we can move it right over, and that historical development would satisfy that objective. So would this. So here basically is the structure of an LEQ essay embedded in the learning objective and the historical developments. Any student in a well-taught class, well-taught AP history class, should be able to take the learning objectives and explain it with the historical developments. And if they did it last year in 2019, if they could explain how regional differences related to slavery caused tensions in the years leading up to the Civil War, they could very easily do this LEQ from last year's AP test. Look at the one in the middle, labeled number 3. Evaluate the extent to which debates over slavery in the period from 1830 to 1860 led the United States into the Civil War. There it is. So do you see how absolutely important it is to use the CED, to use the structure of it, the learning objectives, that's the goal, and then you backwards design from the historical developments to get to that learning objective. And in that regard, I can't tell you how important I think it is that you actually give the pages of the CED to the students and have them annotate them. Take the CED, take a topic page out of the notebook, photocopy it, give it to students, make it an assignment for them to come in and annotate it. We've already seen in a previous presentation the relationship or the correlation between the historical developments and the multiple choice questions on the AP test, and now we've just seen the relationship between the learning objectives and the LEQ. So you can see how incredibly valuable this would be for students to do this. So let me show you an example from one of my best students. I started assigning these about in Unit 3 last year, and it made a huge difference. I just copy this, give it to students, and have them annotate it. Now ideally I would have them take the learning objective and turn it into a question, and then show how the historical developments answer that and flesh it out in details wherever they can. So you see this student actually had their own color coding system, and you see the blue there about the unsustainable peace after World War I and the problems it led to. And she highlighted it in blue and arrowed it up to the top where she talks about war reparations. She does this throughout this page. And needless to say, students who turn this type of work into me did extremely well on my unit exams, which are aligned, like the AP test, directly to the learning objectives and the historical developments. That's the end of this video, and I will see you guys really soon.